It feels like AI is absolutely everywhere, right? We're all using it, and it feels like it's making us faster, smarter, more efficient. But here's the multi-trillion-dollar question that has economists scratching their heads. If we're all getting so much more productive, why isn't it really showing up in the big economic numbers? This is what's known as the AI productivity paradox.
So let's really dig into this. To get to the bottom of that big paradox, you have to start with a much simpler question. Can we even prove that AI is speeding us up on our day-to-day tasks? That is precisely what a team of researchers at Anthropic aimed to figure out in a really fascinating 2025 report.
And this is where the whole thing gets super clever. Instead of doing a typical small-scale lab experiment, they decided to go straight to the source. They came up with this really unique method to analyze how people use AI in the real world by asking their AI model, Claude, to basically analyze its own impact.
So, in this explainer, we're going to break down that exact study, which is called Estimating AI Productivity Gains from Claude Conversations. We're going to walk through their clever method, look at the jaw-dropping results, and talk about what this could all mean for the entire economy. Okay, so here's the core of how they did it. First, they grabbed a huge sample size, 100,000 real, anonymized conversations that people had with Claude. Then, for each conversation, they had the AI ask itself a very smart question. Hey, how long would this task have taken a professional to do without me? Then, they simply measured how long the user actually took to get it done with Claude's help. And that gap, the difference between those two numbers, well, that's the magic metric, the time saved.
Now, I know exactly what you're probably thinking. Hold on. Can we really trust an AI's guess about how long a human would take to do something? And you know what? That's a totally fair question. The researchers knew they had to prove their method was legit, so they put it to the test.
And this chart here shows you just how solid their approach is. They tested on software development tasks where they actually knew how long the job took. When they asked human developers to estimate, their guesses had a correlation to reality of 0.5. And Claude? It hit a correlation of 0.44. The bottom line is, while it's not perfect, the AI's estimate is almost as good as the people who do this for a living. That gives this whole study a really firm foundation.
All right, so the method is clever and it's pretty sound. So let's get to the good stuff, the results. What did they find when they looked at the impact on individual everyday tasks? And here it is, the big headline-grabbing number. Across all those thousands of conversations, the study found that using AI slashed the time it took to finish a task by an average of 80%. Just let that sink in. 80%. That's a massive, massive speed up. It suggests that for the kind of work people are turning to AI for, the efficiency gain isn't just a little boost, it's completely transformative.
And you can see exactly what this looks like in the real world right here. Take curriculum development for a teacher. A task that might have taken $115 worth of their time was done with a 95% time saving. Writing memos and invoices, an 87% speed up. Even something complex like financial analysis saw an 80% time savings. We're not talking about small stuff here. This is core knowledge work.
But of course, people use AI for all sorts of different things. The study found that folks in management and legal fields were using AI for pretty hefty tasks, things that would normally take them about 2 hours to do alone. But on the other end of the spectrum, you had people in, say, food prep or transportation, using it for much quicker jobs, averaging around 30 minutes. The takeaway is that AI is being applied to problems of all shapes and sizes, depending on the job.
And just like the tasks are different, the savings are not spread out evenly either. Some jobs, like healthcare assistants, saw incredible 90% time savings. But for other kinds of work, like trying to figure out a computer hardware problem, the speed up was a more modest 56%. It really goes to show that AI's impact depends heavily on the specific nature of the work.
Okay, so we've seen these huge savings on individual tasks, but what happens when you add it all up? Let's zoom out from the single user and see what the study suggests this could mean for the entire US economy.
This, right here, might be the study's most important finding. When they crunched on the numbers and scaled up their findings, the researchers calculated that if everyone adopted today's AI, it could boost annual U.S. labor productivity growth by 1.8%.
Now, 1.8% might not sound like a crazy number, but to an economist, it is absolutely massive. To put that into perspective, look at this chart. Since 2019, U.S. productivity has been growing at about 1% per year. This study suggests AI could nearly double that rate. That would be like returning to the kind of explosive growth we saw during the dot-com boom of the late 90s.
So where is all this potential growth coming from? Well, it's not evenly distributed. It's actually heavily concentrated in certain jobs. Software developers alone account for almost a fifth of the entire potential gain. After them, you've got managers, marketers, customer service reps, and teachers. This really drives home the point that, at least for now, this AI revolution is being led by knowledge workers and the service industry.
So, a potential doubling of productivity growth, it sounds incredible, almost too good to be true. And this is where the report gives us a much-needed reality check, because the real world has limitations and constraints. The researchers bring up this really powerful idea from a group of economists, and it perfectly introduces this concept of bottlenecks. Basically, it means that you can make one part of a job incredibly fast, but your overall speed is still limited by the essential parts of the job that you can't speed up.
A teacher's job is the perfect example. An AI can help a teacher create a brilliant lesson plan or come up with a new classroom activity in minutes. That's a huge speed up. But it can't enforce the rules in the classroom, it can't sponsor the debate club, and it certainly can't chaperone the school dance. Those essential human tasks, those are the bottlenecks that limit the teacher's overall productivity gain.
And the study itself is very honest about its own limitations. Claude's predictions aren't flawless. The analysis can't see what a person does after they close the chat window, like fact-checking or formatting. It assumes everybody starts using AI, which just isn't realistic overnight. And maybe most importantly, this is all based on today's AI, not the much more powerful tools that are just around the corner. So this is a powerful estimate, not a guaranteed forecast of the future.
And this brings us right back to the central idea, the AI productivity paradox, all wrapped up. We're seeing these mind-blowing speed-ups on specific, isolated tasks, but the real-world, economy-wide growth is being held back by all those essential human parts of a job that AI just can't touch, at least not yet. The report gets written faster, but the meeting to persuade the client still takes just as long.
So this leaves us with one final, really big question to think about. Everything we've discussed today has been about using AI to do the same old tasks, just faster. But if you look back at history, the biggest technological shifts, things like electricity or the internet, the real impact wasn't just speeding up old jobs. It was creating entirely new industries and completely changing how we work. And that's the real test for AI. Can it make that same leap, from being just a productivity tool to becoming a true engine of transformation?